Let's be honest, the 1990s was somewhat of a transitional period in the horror genre, with it coming off the high of the 80s, with films such as Halloween, A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, all franchises that are iconic in the horror genre. However, the 1990s, instead of running out of steam, looked to broaden the genre, taking it into an absurd realm we had yet to explore. So today on Top 5 Scary Videos, I'm going to be counting down our list of the top 5 scariest horror movies from the 90s Part 2. P.S. sorry to anyone who came for Jack. I know he did Part 1, but sometimes sharing is caring. Before we begin, be sure to stick around till the end of the video where I'll be responding to some of your comments. Let's jump in. Coming in at 5, Candyman 1992.
Helen, I came for you.
Directed by Bernard Rose and based on the short story The Forbidden by the legendary Clive Barker, this 1992 horror tells the tale of one of the most terrifying urban legends in history, Candyman. Now on the surface, Candyman should be just like every other urban legend, campfire story, except it's not, and perhaps that's down to Clive Barker, the man that brought us Hellraiser. However, even if that's not the case, something clicks with Candyman. It's intelligent, creepy, and a downright visceral gore fest. For those unfamiliar with both the film and the legend, the Candyman is a murderous soul with a hook for a hand, and is subsequently summoned to reality by a skeptic researching the Candyman myth. Now, this particular incarnation of Candyman was once a slave who was tortured, mangled, and murdered by a gang of white men for fathering a child of a white woman, and this film, in a sense, could be summed up as a revenge tale, with white society finally feeling retribution for their history of slaughtering African Americans. Now, what makes this film truly chilling is its rough urban setting of Cabrini Green, which in turn gives a unique revamp on the slasher aesthetic. We feel discomfort from the get-go, long before the Candyman makes his first appearance. Typically, horrors such as this lose narrative momentum by the final act, however not Candyman. It only gets better as it goes along, resulting in an intense showdown in the Cabrini Green housing projects. Watch it, you'll not be disappointed. Coming in at 4, From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996.
Richie, here is the peace in death that I could not give you in life.
This 1996 horror, directed by Robert Rodriguez, follows two criminals and their hostages who unknowingly seek temporary refuge in a truck stop populated by vampires. Now, not only does it have a stellar plot, but it also has a stellar cast, including George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino, Harvey Keitel, Juliette Lewis, Selma Hayek, Danny Trejo, Tom Savini, and John Hawkes. Yeah, it's impressive. Now the film is already off to a great start with the screenplay written by Quentin Tarantino himself, which makes this another film that pairs up the two iconic directors. The film is blended with action and horror and reminds us of how much fun vampire films can be. The film takes place over one night in Mexico, wherein the two criminal brothers played by George Clooney and Tarantino end up at the den of a bunch of savages who are also demonic vampires. From Dusk Till Dawn is a heavy dose of comedy and wild horror, which focuses not only on vampires but on human behavior in the midst of a supernatural apocalypse. The film is a thrill ride from the get-go and remains one of the greatest vampire movies of all time. Also, seeing a human body reconfigure into the shape of a guitar is something all of us should witness once in our lifetime. Just saying. Coming in at 3, Misery, 1990. Perhaps my favourite Stephen King book and film adaptation of all time, definitely up there with Carrie, Misery was released back in 1990 and follows a famous author who is rescued by a fan after he crashes his car. However, he quickly comes to realise that the care she gives him is just the beginning of days and days of captivity and abuse. Starring the legendary James Caan and Kathy Bates, this macabre tale of fame is both terrifying yet funny, thanks to the adaptation being helped by Rob Reiner, a director known more so for comedy than horror. However, the result is the perfect blend of horror and black comedy, and it flows seamlessly. In essence, the film is an exaggerated version of an overly invested fanboy. Imagine George R.R. Martin having a fanboy. However, what makes this film truly terrifying is the apparent normalcy or domesticity of Annie Wilkes, which is successfully concealing her psychosis, which is slowly revealed to us throughout the movie, where we see Wilkes threaten Caan if he doesn't rewrite his story to suit her needs, or when she breaks both of his ankles with a mallet, a scene which has gone down in movie history and is perhaps one of the most legendary scenes of all time. Coming in at 2, Funny Games 1997.
Aber schnell. Schober.
Wollen Sie jemand anrufen? Die Rettung? Oder die Polizei? Warum tun Sie das?
Not to be confused with the 2007 American remake starring Tim Roth and Naomi Watts, this Austrian horror thriller follows two violent young men who take mother, father and son hostage in their vacation home and force them to play a sadistic game for their own amusement. Now, this is a far more disturbing beast than the 2007 remake and makes us very aware of our own roles in the sadistic game of cat and mouse. When two polite young men wearing white gloves knock on the door of this family's vacation home, things descend into madness when they enter and refuse to leave, tying up the family and forcing them to partake in this horrific game, which we, as an audience, become involved in when one of the men, Paul, breaks the fourth wall, forcing us to be accomplices in the torture. Now, this slasher differs from most, as most of the slashing occurs off screen. However, that doesn't lessen the horror and the sadism of the film, with the audience painfully aware of what is occurring even though we can't see it. It's perhaps one of the most provocative films of all time, as well as the most unconventional, with the film blurring time by using excruciatingly long takes and rewind sequences, which in turn makes the film more fantastical yet just as horrifying to watch. Please watch it, you won't be disappointed. Also, make sure you watch the American remake as well, directed by the same director, and is almost a shot-for-shot remake. Watch them both. And finally, coming in at number 1, Ravenous, 1999.
You know, Ben Franklin once said, "Eat to live. Don't live to eat." Huh?
This horror comedy was released back in 1999 and directed by Antonia Bird, and follows a remote military outpost in the 19th century, and a rescue mission led by Captain John Boyd, which takes an incredibly dark turn when they're ambushed by a sadistic cannibal. Now, first and foremost, this isn't just your typical cannibal movie, it's a cannibal western, and it honestly couldn't be more perfect. After an act of cowardice lands Guy Pearce's character, Lieutenant Boyd, at the Fort Spencer, the few men left at the outpost begin eating one another, with the story working almost as a folklore tale, specifically that of the Wendigo. However, as I previously stated, this is also a dark comedy, with the film kicking off with an anonymous quote that winks at the film's comedic undertones. But the deeper we delve into the story, the more its comedy becomes just another added ingredient in this mad cocktail. Now, although the story has elements of folklore, the real meat is the cost of bloodshed, with the act of eating flesh serving as a healing factor for the cowardly, who live longer because they don't pretend to have a moral compass, especially when it comes to honor. The film is excellent, with a just as excellent score by Michael Nyman and Blur frontman Damon Albarn. If you haven't already, check it out. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with our list? Were there any movies that we missed? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 3. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a few comments from some of our previous videos. Sierra W said, "I clicked on this so fast. My boyfriend lives in Sweden, so I've been wanting to know all the legends and haunted locations." Well, I'm glad you enjoyed. I haven't been to Sweden personally, but it's definitely on my bucket list, and once I go, I plan on checking out all of those haunted places. Just kidding, I won't. Kelvin Coe said, "Great video as usual, Miss McPhee. A video on Chinese urban legends might be nice, maybe one on the Southeast Asian countries too. Keep up the great work, you, Mr. Finch, and your team." Well, shucks, thanks so much. I can definitely try and make Chinese urban legends happen. No promises, but I love it. Ancestor Empire said, "2 Lucy videos in one day. How are we worthy of such an angelic gift?" It's actually a curse. Just saying. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another scary vid. Until next time, see you later.